Hey everyone! In today's video, we're going to build a fully functional and clean-looking multi-select drop-down menu using React and Tailwind CSS. From rendering options to selecting, searching, removing, and even persisting them with local storage, everything will be covered step by step. Let's jump right into it.
Let's start by creating our React project using Vite, which is much faster than Create React app. Open your terminal and run the following commands. Now that our React project is set up, let's open it in the code editor. I'm opening the project in VS Code and we're ready to start working on our multi-select drop-down component. Now that the project is open, let's clean up all the boilerplate code that comes with the default Vite setup. We'll start by opening the src folder and removing the default content in the following files: app.jsx, app.css, and index.css. We want to start fresh with a clean slate. Next, let's install the packages we'll need for the project. First, we'll install Tailwind CSS to handle our styling. It's a utility-first CSS framework that will speed up our design process. I'll go a bit fast here. If you want a detailed walkthrough of how to install and configure Tailwind CSS, you can check out the video I'm showing on screen. With Tailwind set up, we're also going to need React icons for adding icons to our dropdown. Let's install React icons next by running this command. Now that everything's set up, let's start the app and make sure it's running properly. Head over to the terminal and run the command npm run dev. This will start the Vite development server and launch the app in your browser. Once it's up and running, we're ready to begin building our multi-select drop-down component. Now that everything is set up and our app is running, let's start building our drop-down. Inside the src folder, create a new folder called Components. This is where we'll keep all our reusable components. Inside the Components folder, create a new file named dropdown.jsx. This is where we'll write the code for our multi-select drop-down component. Once that's done, we're ready to start coding the drop-down logic. Now, inside dropdown.jsx, let's create the boilerplate code. If you're using the ES7 plus React/Redux extension in VS Code, you can simply type RAFCE and hit enter. This will automatically generate a functional component with an export statement. This gives us a clean starting point to build our drop-down component. Now let's render our drop-down component inside the root file, which is app.jsx. Just go inside the return statement and type dropdown, then hit enter. If you're using VS Code with auto imports, it'll handle the import for you. Once you save it, the browser will automatically refresh, and you should see the drop-down component ready on the screen. Now inside app.jsx, let's replace the React fragment with a div. I'll add some Tailwind CSS classes here to style and give it a clean layout. Also, let's add a simple header above the dropdown, just a h1 tag with a project title so it looks neat. That's it for the base layout. Let's move on to building the dropdown structure now. Now let's give some styling to the header so it looks better. I'm adding Tailwind classes to increase the font size, make it bold, and give it some margin at the bottom to separate it from the dropdown. This makes the header stand out nicely and keeps the layout clean. Now, if you notice that the app isn't taking the full height even though we've set h full, don't worry, we need to do one more thing. Go to index.css and add the following styles for HTML, body and number sign root to ensure they take 100% of the height. Let's head over to dropdown.jsx and start creating the dropdown's core functionality. In the dropdown.jsx component, we're going to use useState to manage the selected options and the search query. We'll also need useEffect to store the selected options in local storage so they persist across page reloads. We'll add an input field that allows users to search for available options. When an option is selected, we'll add it to the list of selected options. For each selected option, we'll display a small tag with a close button that lets users remove the option if they no longer want it. Alright, let's start by importing the required React hooks at the top of our dropdown.jsx file. We'll use useState, useEffect, and useRef. And we'll also import the close icon from React icons. Now let's move to the return statement and start by building out the basic UI structure. For now, I'm just going to create an empty structure. This will be the foundation where we'll add our drop-down content step by step. Now let's add the input field inside our structure. This input will be used to search and filter the drop-down options as the user types. Now let's give the input some basic styling using Tailwind CSS to make it blend better with the UI. This is just the basic input for now. We'll connect it to our state and handle functionality like filtering and keyboard shortcuts in the upcoming steps. Now that we've created our basic input, let's style the outer to give it a proper layout and a border so the input sits inside a nice container. This gives our input a solid border, some padding, and rounded corners, setting the base for our drop-down layout. Now let's add a close icon at the end of the input. This icon will be used to clear the input. We'll add the functionality for it in the upcoming steps. For now, we'll just place it and give it some basic styling. We've used the IOMD close icon from React icons and wrapped it with a hover effect and some padding to make it look interactive. Now let's make sure the close icon looks clickable. We'll add cursor pointer to it. Now when we hover over it, the cursor changes to a pointer, giving users a clear signal that it's interactive. Now it's time to build the drop-down menu. For that, I'll first create a new folder called constants inside the source directory. Then inside that folder, I'll create a file named options.js. In this file, I'll export an array of dummy options. Let's just go with numbers from 1 to 10 for now. It is a good practice to keep your static data or configuration separate, so your component stays clean and focused only on logic and UI. Now let's import the options array from the options.js file we just created in the constants folder into our dropdown.jsx component. Now let's move on to creating the drop-down menu UI. We'll use the options we just imported and render them dynamically in the drop-down. Let's map through our options and display each one inside a div. We'll also make sure to add a unique key prop to each div to help React efficiently update the DOM. Now, if we look at the UI, we can see that our options are rendered correctly in the drop-down menu. Now that we've rendered our options, it's time to style the drop-down menu itself. We'll add some Tailwind CSS classes to make it look neat and polished. Now our drop-down is looking much cleaner with styled options. Next, I'm going to add some Tailwind CSS to the parent div to give it some structure and layout. This will help align everything properly and make the drop-down fit well within our UI. Now we'll move on to creating the select option functionality. For this, we'll set up a state to store the selected options. This will allow us to keep track of what the user selects from the drop-down. Next, since we've already created the state to store selected options, let's create a function that handles the selection. When a user clicks on an option, this function will add it to the selected list, but only if it hasn't already been selected. So here's what the select option function does. When a user clicks on an option from the dropdown, this function checks if that option is already present in the selected option state. If it's not, we update the state by adding that option to the existing list. This ensures that each selected option is stored and can be displayed accordingly. Now let's use the select option function by attaching it to the onClick event of each drop-down item. We'll pass the selected option as an argument to the function, so whenever an item is clicked, it gets added to our selected options list. Now that we've successfully created the select option function and are storing selected values in the selected option state, it's time to render them on the UI. This way, users can see which options they've selected. Next, let's map through the selected option state to render each selected option on the screen. For each selected item, We'll display it inside a small box so the user can clearly see their choices. To allow users to remove a selected option, let's add a close icon next to each selected item. When they click on this icon, we'll remove that option from the selected option state. This gives users the ability to easily manage their selections by removing any unwanted options. Now, let's give some styles to the close icon to make it look better. We'll add a cursor pointer so that it indicates it's clickable, and we'll also apply some hover effects to make it interactive. This will ensure the icon looks nice and intuitive for users to click on. Next, let's set the size of the close icon to 20 pixels, so it's a bit more visible and easier for users to click. This will make the icon appropriately sized and match the design better. Now, if you look at the UI, you'll see that whenever an option is selected from the drop-down menu, it gets rendered inside the input field along with a close icon. This allows users to see their selected options and easily remove them if needed. Let's now style the selected options so they look better. We can add some background color, padding, and rounded corners to make them stand out. This will make the selected options visually appealing and easy to identify for the user. On the UI, you can see that the selected options are looking much better. Now, let's move on to adding the search functionality. This will allow users to search for options and select them easily. To do this, we need to create a state to track the input text that the user types in the search box. Once we have that, we'll filter the drop-down options based on the search query. Let's implement the search functionality now. To start implementing the search functionality, let's first create a state to track the input text. This state will store the value that the user types in the search box. We'll use this state to filter the drop-down options later on. Now that we have the state to track the input text, let's add the onChange and value attributes to the input field. The value attribute will be tied to the state we just created, ensuring that the input field reflects the current state. The onChange attribute will handle updating the state whenever the user types in the search box. Now that we have the input text state in place, let's create the filter options functionality to filter the drop-down options based on the search query. We'll use the search query state to filter the options by checking if each option includes the search text. This way, as the user types in the search box, only the matching options will be displayed in the drop-down. In the filter options functionality, we are using the search query state to filter through the list of options. Specifically, we use the filter method to go through each option in the options array. For each option, we check if it contains the text entered in the search input, ignoring case by converting both the option and the search query to lowercase. The resulting array from filter will only contain the options that match the search query, which will be displayed in the drop-down. Now let's go ahead and replace the original options array with filter options when rendering the drop-down menu. This way, the drop-down will dynamically display only the options that match the search query. Now on the UI, you can see that when we search for something that exists in the array, it works perfectly. The matching options are displayed. But when the user types something that doesn't exist in our list, nothing shows up at all. That creates a bit of a confusing or empty experience. So to improve this, let's add a simple condition. If filter options is empty, we'll show a message like no data found to let the user know that no match was found for their input. Now you can see on the UI, when I search for something that's not in the list, it shows no data found. This is much better for user experience because it gives clear feedback instead of showing an empty space. You can see on the UI, I'm able to select options, but I'm not able to delete them yet. So now let's create the remove option functionality, which will allow users to remove any selected option just by clicking on the close icon beside it. This function takes in the option that we want to remove as its parameter. Then inside, we use the filter method on the selected options array to return a new array that excludes the option we just clicked on. So basically, it loops through all selected options and keeps only those that are not equal to the one we passed in. Finally, we update our state using setSelectedOptions with that new filtered array, which means the UI re-renders and removes the option from the selected list. Now let's go ahead and attach the onClick event to the close icon next to each selected option. We'll pass the remove option function to that event and also pass the option as an argument. This way, when the user clicks the close icon on a specific tag, it knows which one to remove from the selected options array and updates the UI accordingly. On the UI, you can see that I'm now able to delete the options. Great work. Everything's working smoothly so far. Let's keep going. Now let's add a way for the user to clear the input. We'll provide two options, one for clicking the close icon and the other for pressing the escape key. Here's how we'll do it. Step 1. Let's create the clear input function. In this step, we create a function that will reset the input field to an empty string. Step 2. Let's add the handle key down function. Now we'll add a function to handle the escape key. When the user presses escape, the input will be cleared. Now let's connect these functions to our UI. First, for the close icon that we added beside the input, I'll attach the clear input function to its onClick event. So whenever the user clicks on this icon, it will clear the input text. Then for the input field, I'll also attach the handle key down function using the onKeyDown event. This way, if the user presses the escape key on the keyboard, it will also clear the input. Now on the UI, you can see when I select an option, the input is not getting cleared and it's also not focusing back, which is kind of a bad user experience. So to fix this, I'm going to create a ref for the input. And inside the select option function, I'll manually clear the input and bring the focus back to it right after selecting an option. This will make the interaction feel much smoother. Let's do that. Alright, first let's attach the ref to our input element. This will allow us to directly access and control the input field, like clearing its value or setting focus when needed. Now let's update our select option function. After setting the selected option, we'll clear the input by setting the search query to an empty string. Then, using setTimeout, we'll focus the input field again. This ensures the focus happens after the DOM updates. Alright, let's try this on the UI now. Go ahead and select an option from the dropdown. You'll notice that the input clears immediately and the cursor automatically jumps back into the input field. This makes the user experience smoother, especially when selecting multiple options quickly. Now on the UI, if you notice, when we select an option from the dropdown, it's not highlighting the selected options. This might confuse the user since they can't easily tell what's already selected. So to improve this, we'll add a condition to our drop-down menu while mapping the options. If the current option is already in the selected option state, we'll apply a background color or some style to highlight it. This way, the user will immediately know which options have already been selected. On the UI, you can now see that the options which we selected are highlighted in the drop-down menu. This gives a clear visual indication to the user about which options are already selected, improving the overall user experience. Alright, let's add some spacing between the drop-down options so they don't look too cluttered. This will help improve the readability and overall feel of the menu. Perfect. Now what we'll do is control the visibility of the drop-down menu, so it will only appear when the user starts typing something in the input. This will help keep the UI clean and focused. We'll simply check if the search query state has some text, and only then render the drop-down menu. On the UI, you will see that the drop-down menu now only appears when you type something in the input field. This was achieved by adding a condition to show the drop-down menu based on whether there's any text in the search query. When the search query is empty, the drop-down will not be visible, improving the overall user experience by not cluttering the UI with unnecessary options. Next, we'll handle the visibility of the close icon. The close icon should only be visible when there are selected options. When there are no selected options, there's no need for the close icon because there's nothing to remove. So we'll add a condition to show the close icon only when there are selected options. This will improve the user experience by making the close icon appear only when it's necessary for clearing a selected option. Perfect. Now on the UI, you can see that the close icon is not visible when there are no selected options. However, as soon as you select something, the close icon becomes visible, which improves the overall user experience. Now, when you refresh the page, the selected options are not persisting. So to ensure they stay even after a reload, we'll store them in local storage. This will allow the options to persist when the page is reloaded. Let's implement it. To ensure that the selected options are retrieved from local storage when the page reloads, we will update the selected option state to get the values from local storage during the component's initial render.
Alright, now let's test everything we've done. We've updated the code to store the selected options in local storage, so the options should persist even after the page is reloaded. Let's go ahead and try reloading the page. I'll refresh the page now, and as you can see, the selected options are still here. They've been stored in local storage, so after the page reloads, they're automatically restored. This ensures that the user's selections are saved, even if they accidentally refresh the page or close and reopen the browser. This small tweak makes the app much more user-friendly. Now, no matter how many times the page is refreshed, the options will stay exactly as they were. That's the power of local storage for persisting user data. Awesome! We've now got a fully working dropdown with search, selection, removal, and persistent state. Hope you learned something new and found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to like the video. Subscribe for more content like this, and let me know in the comments what you'd like to see next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.